My spouse replied incredulously, "A poor wife is worthless after all," in my divorce file. During my business trip overseas, he tied the knot with his true love and filed for divorce. He further stated, "You married me for my money, isn't that right? You married me for my fortune," he said, accusing me of being greedy and requiring me to give up all rights to the property, as though I had married him for his money alone. When I faced my spouse, he began to unravel. He had treated me horribly and looked down on me ever since we were married. He ultimately arrived at his lowest moment. My name is Julia, and I'm 35. My father died when I was in kindergarten, so my mother raised my sister and me on her alone. I was grateful for my mother, but I secretly wished for a father. I hoped for a happy life with my marriage and many of children, even if I wasn't really looking to become a parent again. Even though we were a family of 3 living off of my mother's earnings, we were happy. I never fully got out of the poverty I was raised in, even after I started working and earning a good livelihood. Even as a single person, I would frequently shop at discount stores for groceries, stocking up on non-perishables during sales. Not only would I never buy bento from convenience stores for my meals, but I would never go out to eat. I started carrying around a thermos of tea for refreshments, and soon I was enjoying myself immensely. Daniel and I got married 4 years ago. We got along well after meeting through a mutual friend. Daniel was affluent from an early age, in contrast to me, who was raised in poverty. We had very different ideas and attitudes about money, but I was lured by the new world he showed me and his kindness. Soon after we first met, we began dating. Since I was ready to get married, and already over 30, we married in less than a year. My flat was convenient for both of our jobs, so we decided to move in together. The rent was extremely low because the apartment was subsidized by the firm, which is one of the reasons we decided to live there. After getting married, Daniel helped with other living expenses, so I continued to pay the rent. This was the start of our married life. Daniel held rather conventional ideas about gender roles, thinking that after marriage, women should give up their jobs and take care of the family, while men should provide financially. I thought these viewpoints were great and manly at the time. He said he would support me if I became a housewife. I was happy then, and I think he saw me as a homemaker who could cook and clean well. However, I enjoyed my work and had significant duties there. Although I didn't enjoy housework, I wasn't planning to be a full-time stay-at-home mom. Since our flat was sponsored by the firm, we would have to move if I resigned from my job, and our rent and moving expenses would increase dramatically. To be honest, Daniel didn't make a lot of money, and our financial needs would grow if we had kids. I made the decision to continue working to save money while I could, especially since I was covering the rent. I quietly brought these concerns to Daniel. "About you wanting me to be a housewife," I said, "I'll take care of the house, but may I work until we have children? Right now, I want us to save as much money as possible." "Huh, are you saying my salary isn't enough? Or do you just want more money to spend?" "It's not about that. I want to save because having kids is expensive. I can even pay the bills with my salary. Having more money is always better, right?" "All right, you make just enough to cover the rent. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. It's preferable to sitting around at home, I guess, but don't slack off on the housework. I'll work until we have children, and I'll also take care of the house." Even though I wasn't entirely comfortable with parts of our conversation, I convinced him to let me continue working. However, looking back, this may have irritated him. Balancing work and housework took more time than I anticipated, and my schedule became hectic. I worked full-time, got up early to cook breakfast, packed lunches for both of us, prepared dinner, and cleaned the house. After Daniel went to bed, I cooked, warmed the bath, and did laundry. We hardly had time together as a couple, and I started to wonder if this was how marriage was supposed to be. Daniel, on the other hand, behaved like a traditional husband and did nothing at home. He must have noticed how busy I was, but all he did was eat dinner, drink beer, and relax. He would take a solo bath and retire to his room. I wished he would help a little, but I was afraid to speak up, thinking he might tell me to quit my job. I naively believed that once we had children, he would start helping more. However, our relationship was becoming increasingly strained, and having children seemed unlikely. One day, I decided to talk to Daniel about it. Hey, we should start considering having kids, right? Kids? Considering how tired you are from work and housework, you're surprisingly energetic. That's not the issue. I'd like to start a family. Our marriage isn't that old. Isn't it too soon for kids? Maybe for you, but I'm already past 30. A woman's time to become a mother is limited, and as I get older, it becomes more difficult. It's almost too late. So we're done having kids. You'd expect me to help if we had one, right? I refuse to help with raising kids. What? It's odd to refuse to help raise a child before they're even born. You don't think you should at least intend to help? It's your child, too. Parenting is your job. I work to support the family. You'll just complain that I'm not helping enough and make me the villain. We don't need kids. Daniel ended the conversation and left for his room. I cried alone in the living room. Not only had my desire for children been denied, but my upbringing had been insulted as well. Our relationship deteriorated rapidly after that, and we barely spoke. With no kids and little interaction, I began thinking about divorce. But I couldn't stop longing for the happy relationship we once had. Eventually, I became overwhelmed with work and housework. I took on a big project that required frequent travel, leaving me away from Daniel for longer periods. One day, I told him about an upcoming trip, expecting the usual indifference. I'm leaving tomorrow for a 10-day business trip. Be careful. You've been working hard. Take care. Instead of his usual mocking tone, Daniel was polite, though he smirked and added, "When you come back, you'll have a big surprise." I was ready to leave him, but his smile made me question my decision. It was almost our wedding anniversary, and I wondered if he had something special planned. I hoped he had changed his mind, but my hopes were shattered by a shocking event. When I returned home 10 days later, I found that my key no longer worked. As I struggled to open the door, Daniel's voice came from inside. "Surprised, Julia? The first surprise is this: you can't use your key anymore. Since I changed the locks, what are you trying to say? Why is my key not working? Open the door. Why would I open my home to a stranger?" I replaced the locks. Just so you know, we got divorced. The second surprise is that a destitute spouse is of no use. Divorce? I never did sign any documents. How on earth were you able to accomplish this? I just faked your autograph. I turned it in using the witness name of a buddy. You're no longer a known person. Do you get? All right. Now you understand. Then we need to discuss property division, right? Okay, property separation. I need you to sign this document to give up the power to divide your possessions. What? I never gave property partition a second thought. I hadn't given divorce a thought. You'll also give up the right to divide your property. Is that correct? How much property do you suppose someone in your situation has? At most, a few thousand in savings. That's not necessary for me. I own more possessions. Therefore, if someone is going to divide the money, it would be me handing it to you, rather than the other way around. Are you not understanding? Is that accurate? All right, that's irrelevant. Let's make the agreement public and alter it to reflect a mutual abandonment of property rights. I shot back. Daniel decided to make the document public after editing it again on his computer. But before we could turn it in, there would be some delay. I decided to gather my belongings and temporarily vacate the residence. He disdained me till the very end. As I was leaving, he said, "You're poor. While you were traveling, I considered discarding your possessions, but you didn't have much and wore the same clothing all the time, which is a sign of poverty. I had a plan, which is why I had very few possessions at the time. The only thing that caught me off guard was Daniel secretly changing the locks. As was to be expected, a terrified Daniel contacted me a few days later. 'Julia, what have you done? What are you trying to say? I haven't taken any action. Why are you being so frantic? I have numerous inquiries. I was first instructed to empty the apartment.' 'Oh, so you continue to reside there? That is not permitted. The month has changed, and you are violating the law. However, it's my home. How are you doing? Did you forget that I was renting an apartment from a company? You can't live there any longer, of course, since I was the lessee. That is absurd. How are you able to accomplish this? I'm in shock at you. Did I not tell you that a rental flat cannot simply have its locks changed? I own the house, so if I want to, I can change the locks. Did you fail to pay attention? It was the flat I rented. The owner is the apartment management. Even if you were the one with the lease, without telling them, you are unable to replace the locks. Is that accurate? While you were changing the locks, I also ended the lease. I had permission to reside there up until this month. I had intended to come back, but you may have committed criminal damage because you changed someone else's property without permission. But why did you end it so quickly? Malicious harm is the reason? The police are currently at the front door. I can't bring myself to open it. Thus, the police did show up. It's probably not for criminal damage or trespassing, so don't worry. I should speak with them instead. What makes me aware of the police? Because I filed a report against you for filing for divorce on your own. It appears that you have engaged in criminal activity related to forgery and unauthorized use of a private document. One individual may submit divorce documents, but only with the consent of both parties and with their own signatures. It is evident that this is illegal because Daniel falsified both the witness and my signature. I kept pushing harder, so the divorce papers you submitted are unreliable, and your marriage with Susan can't happen either. How are you aware of Susan? Did you really believe I was ignorant? I hired a private investigator to look into your relationship with Susan in great detail. At work, things were hectic, and liaising with the agency was difficult. Furthermore, you conducted a lavish wedding ceremony while I was purportedly away on business. How are you doing? It was a lie. Your business travel? Yes, even though I was busy, I took a leave of absence from work to prepare documents and conduct some research. I was aware that you had returned Susan home. This was the kind of evidence that could not have been gathered while working. Following my complete disclosure, even over the phone, Daniel appeared quite depressed and was unable to express himself. He begged me, "Please don't tell Susan that I'm divorced." Why would I do that? No such fact exists to report. Are you serious? I'm grateful. Do you have a misunderstanding? When was your divorce finalized? Remember that bogus divorce decree. It is void. Thus you and I are still married, legally speaking. What? Given that you, my spouse, committed adultery, legally speaking, Susan must make restitution. I sent her the demand for reparations via rapid delivery yesterday. I take it that she was unaware of your marriage. Then at this time, I am unable to retract the assertion. Even though I knew Susan thought Daniel was unmarried, I nonetheless submitted the demand for reparations on purpose. Perhaps Susan hasn't gotten the letter because she hasn't gotten in touch with me yet. It ought to show up shortly. When you have to deal with the cops, should I be on the phone with you as well? You have a lot on your plate. I refuse to listen to the cops. No one will arrest me before Susan or her family can receive the letter. I'm heading to her house right now to get it. Then he hung up. He most likely walked straight to Susan's house to stand by the front door and wait for the postman. Since the letter was sent as registered mail to Susan alone, I knew it would be in vain. He couldn't get it even if he waited for the postman. Daniel called me a few hours later, looking dejected. When the postman arrived, there had been an incident. Finally, I'll take that envelope. Who are you? You do not reside here, correct? Since I'm married, I live here. Basically, I'm entitled to receive my letters. As you can see, I'm unable to offer you this envelope. The mail is registered to Susan alone. What? Please give it to me. Certainly not. If you're really that keen, get Susan's. Okay. What's going on here? Ah, Daniel, why is there so much noise? What's taking place? Ah, Susan, you have registered mail. This dude would not take it. I apologize for the inconvenience. I'll be heading out now. What is this? A call for restitution? Daniel, you were wed. What's happening here? I apologize, but she was formerly married to someone else. I was ashamed to announce my divorce. I apologize for keeping things under wraps. However, isn't it odd? We just started dating, and already there's a demand for payment. There shouldn't be any issues if you were divorced prior to our dating relationship, right? My ex-wife is insane. All right, perhaps she's requesting compensation because I got married out of resentment. That was his justification. However, it was soon shown to be a lie. I wrote a letter and included my contact details in the envelope. So Susan gave me a call. I informed her during that call about the infidelity, the null and void divorce, and their nuptials while he was still my husband. They'd had a ceremony, but they still hadn't filed the marriage registration. It was still pending since Daniel wanted to submit it on a nice couple's day. He most likely put off filing for marriage registration since he wasn't sure if the divorce was finalized. Daniel ran from Susan's house when he was exposed and contacted me again without hesitation. I needed to tell Daniel something crucial after our meeting at the adjacent cafe. Daniel began talking first as soon as I got there. Julia, kindly remove your demand for reparations. Assume for the moment that we are now formally divorced. After a protracted separation, I might perhaps cover it up and apologize to Susan for my covert divorce. Do you really believe I'm begging to stay in your marriage? I was going to get a divorce otherwise, but you have to pay back the money. You cheated on me. I guess you're just trying to get money out of me, normal for the underprivileged. You really do have a weak heart. You're speaking gibberish. Everything can vary based on my response. We still have the choice not to get divorced. You can't refuse if I say no, which means you can't marry Susan, and your marital status will be made public. All right, I'll cover the damages. Divorce me right away. Please sign here. What about property division? How much more are you hoping to get out of me? Reparation ought to be sufficient. Recall that we decided not to divide the property, correct? So let's formalize it now. All right, you're not as horrible as I believed. I'm grateful. After creating a public document for property division and reparations with a public notary, we headed to City Hall to file the divorce paperwork and complete our divorce. Feeling relieved, I said my goodbyes to Daniel. Glad we don't have to divide property. What are you saying? It's something that helps me. Do you still possess any assets after giving me my money back? By the way, Susan is going to demand the damages as well. She said there will be a fee for the wedding. That isn't feasible. Susan and I are getting married. She is not able to say that now that we're divorced. There shouldn't be any issues. You continue to exist in fiction. You cheated on your spouse while you were still married. You got married. Do you think Susan still has faith in you? Fraud in marriage. That is absurd. Susan is going to believe me. Feel that if you so choose. Susan told me straight. Did the guests at your wedding not receive payment for their roles? You still owe them money. You were aware of that? I still haven't paid them. Why is it important to you? You would have been better off if you had just accepted property division. That is what I intended to convey to you. Even if we had divided property, you would have benefited more. What topic are you discussing? The poor woman? You only make $115,000 a year, and your family is impoverished, correct? Even a raise would only amount to about $20,000. You possess no property. I figured you might be wrong, because you constantly call me poor. Yes, I do make $155,000 a year, but you are aware that I am employed for a foreign corporation, right? I became a director of the American branch, but it doesn't appear like you're interested in me. Instead of $115,000 a year, it is $155,000 monthly. That indicates a $1.86 million yearly income. $180,000 a year. $180,000? That is not possible. Obviously, I've been saving that money for the future. Since I haven't had the opportunity to spend that much, there is still a sizable amount of funds from before our marriage, but they are not included in the property division. As a result, I might have divided the property to obtain half of it. After all, you were my destiny. I'll have the divorce documents updated. How are you doing? If you have that much money, do you think I'd gladly undo the divorce after all that hatred? I explained to Daniel that the reparations claim was non-negotiable. After our conversation at the cafe, you mean you don't have to ask for compensation. It's not much for you at all. Whoever laughs at 1 cent will cry over 1 cent. I'm making this payment to make up for the mental pain you caused me. Sincerely, I'd like to make additional claims. Now that it's official, please make sure you pay it, even if you have to do it in payments. I will have no money at all. Don't return to the flat either. By now, your stuff ought to have been transported to your parents' place. You may have assumed I didn't have many possessions, but that was before I relocated. For the most part, they were. Were you really that uninterested in me? I have to return to my parents' place since I can't have so little. They are ignorant at this point, are they not? Allow me to clarify. Refrain from speaking. I fill them in on everything already. We should be transparent about our reasons for divorce. Oh, and your father told me not to cross our threshold ever again, so I'm stuck. I left the cafe as Daniel looked to crumple beneath the weight of it all. I later learned that despite my advice, he got into difficulties at the police station. Returning to the flat, he sat in the vacant room aimlessly until the manager phoned the police, at which point he was hauled away. Following Daniel's apprehension and the ensuing legal actions, his parents accepted accountability and endeavored to mend fences. They expressed their regret to Susan's family and paid off all debts associated with the wedding. I expected Susan's family to file a lawsuit for marriage fraud, but they chose not to. I didn't waver in my resolve to sue Daniel for falsifying the divorce documents. Though he made a settlement offer, I decided to press the lawsuit nevertheless. For me, it wasn't about the money. It was about Daniel having to deal with the fallout and realizing how serious his actions were. I was able to handle the legal process without it being too heavy, with the help of my attorney. Daniel was eventually fired as a result of his behavior at work being revealed. Due to his inability to obtain a steady job, he was forced to work long hours at a relative's construction company, where his father used the majority of his pay to settle his obligations. It was evident that Daniel's parents, more stringent than I had thought, had gone to considerable lengths to ensure he reimbursed Susan for her damages, as well as my reimbursement. This was a turning point in Daniel's life, where he had to face the results of his decisions and how they affected other people. Moving abroad after my divorce was finalized offered me a much-needed sense of independence, even though I had already experienced a lot and had learned to be resilient. I took solace in a new friendship I made with a foreign executive at my company's head office. They experienced empathy and support, especially as they anticipated the arrival of their first child together. My personal experiences have shown me how crucial it is to have honest conversations and how difficult decisions must be made in unhappy marriages. I learned that suffering in silence wasn't always a good thing, and that sometimes the only path to happiness and personal fulfillment was to obtain a divorce. With my partner at my side and plans for co-parenting, I welcomed a newfound sense of serenity and self-assurance. I was happy to have the opportunity to raise the happy family I had always dreamed of. I saw firsthand the importance of bravery in facing harsh truths and choosing choices that advance happiness and personal growth as she prepared for maternity leave and looked forward to their upcoming nuptials.